So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Arlene Hirschfeld. She is a Harvard Divinity School board member, and she's going to introduce our special speaker. And I do want to say, again, you're in for a treat. Spent about a day and a half with Hawa, and her story is incredible. She, in fact, said that when she was here, she grew up in a village in Africa, and coming to Park City is a little different, as you can imagine. And what she was so wonderful, what she said, though, this morning when the sun came out, there's snow all over the mountains. She thought, if heaven was a place she could experience, this may be a little taste of heaven. So she has been well acquainted to Park City in the day and a half and loves it. And so we just want to say on behalf of Park City, welcome, Hawa. So Arlene Hirschfeld, let's give her a warm welcome tonight.
Good evening. There we go, down to my level. As Rob said, I'm Arlene Hirschfeld. I'm a member of the Harvard Divinity School Dean's Council, where I have the privilege of serving alongside Susan Swartz. On behalf of Dean David Hempton, the Dean of our Divinity School, I have the pleasure of welcoming you to what promises to be an enlightening, interesting talk from lawyer, scholar, and human rights activist Hawa Ibrahim. Before I say more about the Divinity School and Hawa, I'd like to recognize Susan and Jim Swartz, whose extraordinary dedication and support make this event and so many others possible. Thank you, Susan and Jim, for all that you do for the Harvard Divinity School and WSRP. We can't thank you enough. Harvard Divinity School is grateful to have partnered with the Christian Center of Park City to bring Hawa to this wonderful community. Rob Harder, Jackie Wilson, and their team have found time in the midst of their incredibly busy work schedule to plan and organize this event, and we thank you so very, very much. It wouldn't happen without you. For 40 years now, the Harvard Women's Studies and Religion program has exemplified Harvard Divinity School's mission to illuminate, engage, and serve humanity. The work of the WSRP scholars, like Karen King, Susan Heschel, and Hawa, has changed the way societies look at women and faith. I'd like to just say a few words about what this program is and outline it for you, and want to tell you that out in the lobby on the table are some brochures about the WSRP, and Hannah Peters, our Associate Dean for External Affairs, is here. Hannah, if you have questions or want to visit further about the program, just find Hannah. She would enjoy that. So each year, 5 scholars are picked from at least 100 to come to Harvard to work for a year. They are working on a book or a publication. They teach a class, they give a public lecture. When that year is over, they go back to their work, to their institutions, and they mentor and they teach others. The program has 2 key components. One is impeccable scholarship, looking at women and their roles in relation to religious traditions by these 5 scholars each year. And secondly, and equally important, is widespread communication about their work provided by the scholars like Hawa this evening to those of us in the lay community, so that this work gets out of academia and into the real world. Again, Susan and Jim, thank you for providing this important opportunity tonight. It is the dream of the founder of this program, Connie Buchanan, that events like this will happen, and we cannot thank you enough, and we know others are following in other cities. Thank you for being such great role models for all of us. Our speaker this evening is a living illustration of the impact of this program and what it has on women around the world. In 2002, Hawa Ibrahim successfully defended a woman who faced death by stoning. It was the penalty for adultery under the Nigerian Penal Code's interpretation of Shariah law. Over the next decade, she accepted dozens of pro bono cases that challenged Shariah and set important precedents with her victories in court. In the process, she garnered international recognition as a human rights activist, earning the European Parliament's prestigious Sakharov Prize for Freedom of Thought in 2005. Hawa came to Harvard and to WSRP as a research fellow in 2010 to work on her book, Practicing Law in Sharia Courts, 7 Strategies. This was published last year, Practicing Law in Sharia Courts. It has been now distributed throughout Nigeria, including branches of the Nigerian Bar Association. changing the way that the legal system treats not only women, but also the poor, the illiterate, and the powerless. It is my honor to welcome Hawa here tonight to talk to us about her very important work. Hawa?
Thank you so much. I am honored to be here. And I said earlier, it's so humbling to come. I felt I have so much favor that is undeserved. And part of it is you're honoring me with your presence tonight. And I thank you so very much. I want to thank the center, the Christian Center of Park City, for inviting me. I especially want to thank Linda, Pat, Eileen, Hannah Peters, for sticking with me for the past 4 years. And I always say, and they're tired of listening to me every time. I especially want to say thank you to Jim and to Susan. They opened up their doors and welcomed us yesterday into their home. And I said earlier today, from where I'm coming from, my background, I'm not fit enough to be a cleaner in their space. But for them to open their home and to welcome us as equals tells of much who they are. And I spent the night yesterday and today with Susan and her husband. And my feeling is that when you come around Susan, you feel a sense of holiness or something unique about her. And then when we went out to see the Christian Center, I remind myself of a verse in the good book that says, when I'm hungry, you give me food. And when I'm thirsty, you give me water. When I'm in prison, you came to visit me. And the Lord said, when they answered, we didn't visit you. We didn't give you water. We didn't feed you. And he said, when you do to the least of these ones, as you do it unto me. And I thought that was a powerful story I took from visiting the Christian Center today. The least you do unto those ones, you do it unto the Lord, unto God Almighty, unto Allah. And thank you for what you do. I want to thank you for coming. Hannah Peters is here. She mentioned that the dean was supposed to be here, the dean of the Harvard Divinity School, but he couldn't make it, and she came on his behalf. Harvard had been unconditionally generous with me through the Women Studies and Religious program. They helped me to give me a space to write my book, which I'll speak about, and they provided 5,000 copies to be distributed to judges and lawyers in Nigeria, across West Africa, and across the world, and we're in the process of distributing. I also want to thank the women that have supported me financially, and some of them I've mentioned earlier today, to get the book. And by the way, they are non-Muslims, and we'll speak about that in a moment. The staffs of the center, especially the volunteers, you humbled me, and thank you for doing what you do. Thank, in absentia, my dear sister and friend, Anne Browdy. Jackie, for driving us in the snow yesterday, thank you. And thank you all for coming and for honoring me. The members for the ones controlling the microphone and the camera, thank you so much. I come from Nigeria, and that's my country of birth. It's a beautiful country. We have 170 million people. About 80 million are Muslims. It's a diverse country. You have the south that has no Sharia, which I'll be speaking to in a moment, and we have the north that has Sharia. Oh, what is Sharia? What is Islam? And I'll address it in a moment, but I just wanted to give you a feel of the country and how diverse it is. We have 4 legal systems in Nigeria, and we have 250 languages, and we have 500 dialects. We were a British colony and got our independence in 1960. And the Sharia I was speaking about had always been with us as a country. It was suggested it came into Nigeria in the 7th, or some people say the 13th century. But over time, we had no criminal Sharia, and I'll address that. But I just remember I need to mention 1 or 2 things. One, which is very important, that I am not an Islamic scholar. I have to make that disclaimer, that I'm just a lawyer. And I'm trying to see if I can see you because of the light on my face. English is my 5th language, so if you don't understand what I'm saying, I'm trying to slow down otherwise I won't communicate, and I want us to communicate. Please wave your hand, and I will repeat what I say because I want us to understand each other so that we can open up more for Q&A. And I also actually want to speak to what you want to hear, so I will make sure my remarks are not as long. I was educated accidentally, became a lawyer by accident. I guess I went to Harvard to teach and to write accidentally, and we could talk a little bit more if you want to hear about that. I was a prosecutor for 8 years before I left the Ministry of Justice and established a legal firm called Aries Law Firm. For 2 years, I had no clients because where I come from, women are not supposed to be educated. They are not supposed to be lawyers. They are not supposed to have legal chambers. So I had no client for 2 years, and then I did something with my time and subsequently took up the cases of Sharia when it was introduced in 1999. I did most of the cases under Sharia pro bono, and I'll speak a little bit to that, but I want to address the issue, what is Islam? What is Sharia? Not as a scholar, just as a lawyer. I was born and raised a Muslim myself, and the religion I know that is Islam comes from the word salam, and salam is shalom, and shalom is peace, and that is Islam. Now, it's interpreted differently in different contexts by different people, but that is what I grew up to know. And in most society where Muslims are, that is it for them. The governing law, the holy book of Muslims, is the Quran. 1/3 of the Quran is about worship. A substantial part of the Quran is about moral aptitude. But what do they believe in? Muslims believe that there is only one God, and they call that God Allah, and that Muhammad is his prophet. They believe in angels. They believe in the Torah of Moses. Muslims believe in the book of Psalms and in the Injil, which is the New Testament. That's their belief. They believe that there is life and there is death, life after death and there is judgment. They believe in hell and they believe in heaven. But what is Sharia then? Why is Sharia so different? So Sharia is the law that governs Muslims. And Sharia is supposed to be a way of life from the cradle to the grave. And Sharia is contextual. So Sharia that is applied in Nigeria may not be the Sharia that is applied to Somalia or to Sudan, which is in the same region. What are the sources of Sharia? As I mentioned earlier on, is the Quran and the Sunnah, which is the practice of the Holy Prophet. They are the 2 major sources of Sharia. And then you have the other subsidiary sources of Sharia. But there are schools of thinking in Sharia, and that is where we have a challenge. There are 4 major schools of thinking in the Sunni. And what happened is that one of the school of thinking has interpreted some of the strict punishment of Sharia in different way than the other school of thinking. And places like my country that have adopted one of the school of thinking, Maliki, decided to adopt the strict interpretation of Sharia. And the 4th school of thinking is Hanafi, Shafi'i, Hanbali, and Maliki. So, how did we get Sharia as a people? Since we never had it since after independence. After independence, we had gone through a lot of military coup in Nigeria. And in 1999, one of the governors, so we had the military handing over to civilian, so there was campaign. And he campaigned to say, if you elect me as a governor, I'm going to give you Sharia. I'll introduce Sharia. Now, remember that about 70 to 80% of the people in the rural areas are illiterate. They can't read or write. So whether they understood Sharia is something else. But he delivered on his campaign promise. And he gave them Sharia in one state called Zamfara on the 27th of October in 1999. And I came into Sharia because I am one of the few female lawyers from the northern Nigeria that practices independently. And I was invited by a non-governmental organization to put up a team to help with the first Sharia case, and the name of the girl is Baria. That was at the end of 1999. So that is my involvement with the Sharia. But let me mention here the pillars of Islam, which I thought I mentioned before I go into my own involvement about discussing our topic today, practicing Sharia. The pillars of Islam is simple, is 5. Prayers, like I said, a chunk of the Quran is about worship. So Muslims pray 5 times in a day. The second is fasting in the month of Ramadan. So one of the months on there is a holy month, which is called the month of Ramadan, the people fast. The third one is zakat, giving alms to the poor, which is a very important part of Islam. The fourth one is the faith itself, which is pronounced in what we call kalman shahada, which is the pronouncement that la ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. That sort of is one of the pillars. And the last pillar is if you can afford it, you go to Mecca. So that are the 5 major pillars that I wanted to just put there. In my thought, I'll mention some few big concepts, and I'll open it more, I think, during Q&A. But let me speak to practicing Sharia. I mentioned to you how I came into practice Sharia, but how do we do it, and what is it relevant here in this meeting? Like I mentioned, I was invited to put up a team. So the first thing I do as a lawyer when I was told to do a case, especially of barrier, we put up a legal team. And I could talk to you a little bit more about how we form our team, which is supposed to be local, the mullahs, the lawyers, opinion leaders, and we have a team. The next step is to get the trial court record. Almost all the clients have been involved in defending their cases, 157. None of them had a lawyer at the trial level. So at the trial level, they were convicted without a lawyer. So what we did was to go back to the trial court and retrieve the record, and we formulate our case based on the record of the court. We usually formulate our case around 4 major issues. First, the issues of law, issues of fact, issues of technicalities, and issues of procedure. So that is the 4 major things we put around as we formulate our case for appeal. We have a right of appeal and a second right of appeal. And I will discuss one case and how we did it. And that is only at the state level. By the time you leave the state, you cannot appeal to the federal level because the Constitution has not recognized Sharia, the criminal aspect of Sharia, and we could talk about it. So the criminal jurisdiction of Sharia has not been recognized by the Nigerian Constitution. And so we cannot go beyond the state courts. And so that is how a case goes. And like I say, I'll discuss maybe a little bit of a detail. I'll use one case to illustrate. But what were the issues that we faced while we were doing some of these cases? I will mention some few issues, and I'll just drop it on you, and hopefully we could talk about it in Q&A. We face issues such as, what is supreme? Do you have supremacy of law in your country? Which one is supreme? Is it the Constitution or is the Sharia penal court law? What is supreme? You have a constitution. Which one is supreme? So that's question number one. Do you have separation of state and religion? Do you have separation of powers when the governor could act as the head of the judiciary? Do we have separation of powers? Oh, do we respect the fundamental human right of those women and children under the new Sharia? Now, the new Sharia that was introduced in 1999, that introduces the new criminal offenses and punishment, introduces basically 5 major issues. If you drink alcohol, you'll be flogged publicly 100. If you commit adultery and you are not married, you'll be stoned to death. If you are married, you'll be flogged 100. If you steal, you have your limbs amputated. If you change your religion, it's apostasy, you'll be stoned. And if you steal and kill in the process of stealing, they call it hiraba under the law, you'll be crucified. So this is actually what Sharia was introduced in 1999, introduced. That's the major offenses and punishment. So the question to us is, how does this flow into respect of fundamental human right of a person, especially those women that were sentenced to die by stoning? Another question we faced was the certainty of the Sharia law. It doesn't look on the face of it that it's certain, where some section of the Sharia law, the Sharia penal court law, suggests that in case the judges may not find an interpretation, they could formulate one. So there is certainty of the law. The next question we face is the independence of the interpretation of this law, independence of the judiciary. Are the judges independent? Actually, are they knowledgeable? Both the judges and the lawyers have not technically gone to Sharia schools. The lawyers up to today are trained under the common law system, so you don't have Sharia degree as a lawyer. The judges were dealing with civil matters before the criminal was introduced, so you could see the layers of complication about the independency of the judiciary and as that appears before them. So these are some of the few questions that we faced while we were handling some of these cases. Most of the clients, as Eileen has mentioned in the introduction, have 4 traits that connect almost all of them. They are illiterate, they are poor, they are powerless, and they are voiceless. So imagine those traits in somebody that found themselves in a Sharia legal system that they don't even know why they were brought to court. And I will use the case of Amina to illustrate how that could happen and what could be the result of it. But let me say here that we worked within Sharia. Even though I was trained under the common law, our cases were Sharia cases. The courts that were listening to our cases are Sharia courts. The law we use to defend those clients are Sharia laws. And we won justice in the Sharia court. So I'll talk to you about how we did it, and that is the mantra of the book, Practicing Sharia Law, the 7 Strategies of Achieving Justice. I discuss in detail the strategies that we use. I'll mention some few of them, illustrating it with the case of Amina Lawal so that I can take the point home. Amina Lawal was a young woman in northern Nigeria. She was convicted in 2001 of zina, Z-I-N-A, that is the offense. But it also means fornication and adultery lumped together as zina. So she was convicted of zina on 2 counts, that she confesses to adultery, to zina, and that she was pregnant and she has no husband. And the trial court came to the conclusion that she has committed zina, and so she should be stoned to death. So I came into the matter after it has been tried. We formed a team, and with the team we formulated those grounds I earlier mentioned. About the same time, now we went on appeal. Some of you that watches news may know about the Miss Pageant, the Miss Beauty Pageant, the Global Beauty Pageant was happening, and it was taking place in Nigeria in 2001, and it was shortly after the 9/11. So the press was on us, on the cases, and people are trying to trace where are these fundamentalist ideas coming from? Why can't somebody stone under Islam a woman? Something is not happening right. So there was this layer of the media that we never knew. So we went and argued the case on appeal, and we failed woefully on all the 15 counts we put before the court. We failed. But we had the last appeal. And we went on final appeal to the Shariah Court of Appeal in Katsina State, and then we won. We won mainly on technical grounds. And like I said, we could discuss more on Q&A. But the few things I wanted to draw in the case of Amina Lawal is that she was not only illiterate and powerless, she never knew why she was in court. But more, for us, to win in the court was good winning, but winning outside the court was for us much more. And I will speak to how winning the hearts and mind of the villagers was more powerful for our winning in court than just winning in court. Maybe they could execute the punishment outside the courtroom. And I illustrate it usually, or those people that have heard me speak, with my experience with the mullahs. While we were doing the case of Amina in 2001, I was accosted by a BBC reporter, and I was asked just a simple question. And the question was, is not stoning to death in the Quran? Simple. And I gave a simple answer. I don't think so. I've never seen one. For some of us that have read the Bible, there are not less than 39 instances of stoning, but I didn't see one in the Quran. But it was broadcast on the radio over and over again in Hausa, which is the language of the region. And the mullahs decided to answer back in the radio. And they said I was anti-Islam and I was anti-Sharia, and maybe I was being paid to destroy Sharia. And so I searched for the reporter to ask him if he could introduce me to the mullahs. He hesitated after I insisted. He said he would not be responsible for me, but he would introduce me to the mullahs. He was very generous and kind to introduce me, but they were more generous to even accept to see me, because in the meantime, we have tried to see them for months on end. But they wanted to see me in a mosque. For some of you that could see me clearly, I am dressed, I think, decently, but I'm not properly dressed to enter a mosque. So I was dressed from my fingers to my toes, completely covered, and completely covered my head. And I'm saying that to stress one word: sensitivity. And I went to the mosque to see them. There were 8 mullahs, and they were sitting in a huge mosque. I think it would take about 2,000 to 3,000 worshippers, if not more, at the end of the mosque. And I walked in. While I was walking in, I noticed there was a chair halfway, but I didn't go near the chair. I approached the mullahs. While I was walking toward them, and close to them, I decided to kneel down before them and to sit on the floor. For those of you that remember, I was interviewed on stoning. I never brought the word stoning or the interview in this approach at all. When I sat on the floor, they chorused at the same time, "Stand up, go and sit on the chair," they said to me. But remember, in my culture, you don't look at the men on their faces. So I was looking on the floor. And I said to them, "How can I, your daughter, sit on a chair when you, my fathers, are sitting on a chair?" They were quiet for some time, but when they answered me, they asked, "Are you the lawyer? Are you Hawa Ibrahim? Oh, you didn't forget your cultures and your religious training." And to all I said, "No." But most importantly, I said to them, I'm a foolish lawyer. That I'm a silly lawyer. That I think I'm doing something out there, but I wasn't sure I was doing it correctly. And I came before them because I needed their wisdom. I needed them to give me knowledge and help me to go out there to do what is good. Now, it's important for you to know that this is my dynamic, and I decided to use it on the cases to achieve justice for this woman within the mullah's mind and heart, because they transmit it to the society where they preach every morning. That is my dynamic, and I choose to use it. I don't know what is yours, but it was my dynamic. And I wanted to say two more things about my approach to the mullahs. I understood the sensitivity of the moment, and I understood that humility could pay. I had no air of importance that I was a lawyer. But most importantly, I wanted to engage. And engagement brought out the result that they told me at the end of the meeting, that they will publicly not support me, but they will also publicly not oppose me. That is a huge security statement. Because if they don't oppose me publicly, it means I can continue to do the cases of Sharia, which I did. I was having 47 cases then. At the end of it, I am having now 157. And I'll make some few more comments and I'll stop so that I can open it for Q&A. I had been asked, why do you do what you do? You are not paid. I have a threat. For some of you that know the threat of death. So you have had threats of fatwa, and you are not paid. Why do you do it? And so this is partly why I do it. And I'll tell you two reasons why I do what I do. The cases stigmatizes, and the cases does not pay. But more importantly, you lose clients by doing those cases. And I do those cases despite the fact that I know all these things, for the simple reason that there is something in us, in me, that was restless. And I'm going to use a story that some of you may know of a prophet in the good book called Elijah. This prophet was praying. He was praying for the state of Israel, his people. And he was praying because there was a problem. And he prayed so hard. And while he was praying, I'm going to model the story here, but forgive me. He was praying so hard, but the first sign that came was that there was wind, a very powerful wind that shook mountains. Pieces were falling. And he said, yes, God is going to be in this space. He's going to answer my prayers. The wind came and left, and God was not in the wind. But He went on praying. And then there was earthquake. Very powerful earthquake. And he said, now God is here. He's going to answer my prayers. The earthquake went. God was not in the earthquake. He went, continued to pray. And then there was fire, consuming fire. And he said, alas, God is here to answer my prayers. But God was not in the fire either. What I've learned at the end of this story was that another verse says, be still. And in the stillness of his inside, God answered him. And my take is that when there is chaos, when the Shariah cases were introduced and we had disappointment, and we had death threats, we walk out, drive out of our home, we don't know whether we are coming back. We had rejection from families and from friends for taking up the Shariah cases. What I learned is that I need to be still from inside. Be still and know. That is why I do the cases. The ability to be still and to listen to the inside. That is reason number one why I do the cases. The second and the last reason before I open up for Q&A why I do the cases is my hunger. I hunger and thirst. So the deer pant for water, I pant for ability to do good. Whatever doing good means, I don't know. But I wake up every morning to say, if I will smile at somebody and that makes a person's day, I am happy to do that. So I do the cases because I believe in the dignity of this woman and knowing that everyone matters. I spoke earlier today as to what I do, how I do it, and where I do it. And I use two acronyms, WWW, while we wait. Better still, why I wait. And I do the HBO, not the HBO of Jim. I try to hear the inside. I try to see if I could cling onto a belief, and I try to obey. So WWW and HBO. But how? And I said, I try. Most of you do much more. And I welcome every morning the dawn of the morning, the sunrise never finds me lying down on my bed. I welcome it on my knees. That is why I do the cases. That's how I listen. That's how I get my inspiration. That's how I move on day by day. Now, I have learned some few things while doing those cases, and I'll just mention a few of them. I've learned that there is a place for everyone in the book. Muslim, Christian, Jewish, none of the above. There is a place for you in the book. That is what I have learned. I have learned that beyond what we see, there is something we know that we know that we know. And we know, and we can say, that we are here today not because of the race of the person speaking, not because of the color of our skin, not because of our privileges, whether we are rich or poor. We are here not because of our creed or our religion. There is something that is powerful that unites all of us in this room. And that is the power of our human dignity. That is the worth of each of us knowing that all of us are born free to pursue happiness. I guess that is why we are here, so we know that we know. And let me end up by saying that over the years I have practiced as a lawyer, this is the 25th year, I have been humbled by very many circumstances. And I said earlier on today, when you sow, you reap. You sow, you reap. You sow good, you reap good. I wouldn't have been here today, and I told you how I accidentally became educated, if not because of sowing. I was sowing, and you have sowed much better seed than I have sowed. I was sowing my seeds in places where, in my villages, where we have no means of getting to the places we are going. So there is no car, there is no motorbike, there is no bicycle. We go to some of those courts when we have ended where we can get some of this transportation means we take the donkeys or the horses or the camel. We have no TV, we have no telephone. So how the media got to pick up what we do, we don't know. But I summarize it in sowing. And I believe that each of you here is sowing even bigger seed. And the world is a better place because of each of you here and because of Susan and Jim. Thank you so much. Feel free to ask any question. If you raise your hand, the mic will be given to you.
Before we do the Q&A, we're going to have
I'm
an
so
opportunity.
sorry.
So, you got it? We are going to have some opportunity to ask Hawa specific questions, but before we do that, we've got a special trailer. There is a film that's coming up that Hawa is featured in, and I asked Geraldine Dreyfus to come up, talk a little bit about the film, and we're actually going to see about a 7-minute clip. It's a fascinating film. It's actually being produced as we speak. So Geraldine, tell us a little bit more about this. Geraldine Dreyfus, many of you know her. She's a board member at the Christian Center and producer, director extraordinaire, and does all kinds of things around here for good. Let's give a warm welcome to Geraldine Dreyfus.
Thank you. Thank you so much. The clips we're about to show you is a film that's a work in progress called 3 Judges. It's being directed by Erica Cohn, who's here with us tonight, and produced by Jennifer Jordan, who's also here with us tonight. I'm very proud that it's a local production with 3 great women, including myself in that unabashedly, but the 3 great judges. But it's fun to be working with these 2 ladies. And it was a complete honor that last February, Susan and Jim made it possible for Erica to travel with one of our subjects in the film to the Harvard Divinity School to meet Hawa and to actually, which was a great honor for everybody because a number of women who are aspiring to interpret Shariah law and adjudicate on behalf of women and girls are inspired by your example. So they are all standing on your very strong shoulders, and we're very delighted to have you here tonight. So we're going to show a clip of the film, and we'll tell you a little bit about where we are in the production. The goal is in February that Erica will return to Palestine and follow our 3 subjects. This is an unprecedented moment in Middle Eastern history because these are the first judges that are female judges that have been appointed in the Middle East to work in religious courts. And it has not been without the chagrin of many people and the surprise. So it's one of the things that we'll be following is whether their appointments will stay intact, and there have been consequences for the male judge that appointed them already. So let's take a look at the clip. I'd like to thank Linda Goldstein, who's with us from Denver, and Jim and Susan for being our initial funders of this film, and the Catalyst Foundation, represented by Lady Diana Lady Dugan and Lynn Dugan have put out a challenge grant. So if anyone's interested in supporting a local production team to continue this story, you can see me or Jennifer after tonight. But we'd love to have you come back up and answer some questions and talk about why it's important that the media gets the complexity of Islam and Sharia law right and what the consequences are if we don't.
Thank you. Now it's better. I can see your faces. Yeah, I couldn't see your face.
Your question, feel free. We'll get it via mic. Maybe be able to stand up and share it.
Focusing on the negatives. Did I see a mic somewhere? Did I answer your question?
I just wanted to know what your education, how it started, because you said everything was by accident.
I was, I came from a culture where girls are not allowed to go to school. So at the age of 10, 12, you are given out in marriage. And that is what happened with me. My mother summarized it better. She said I was a rebellious child. So partly inside was rebelling for education. Partly she has to do with it because we all grew up in a small village. And I mentioned we had no electricity, no road, no any facilities. And when we were growing up, I was hawking. I was buying and selling vegetables, anything that is you buy and you sell. I go to the mountains to make wood to sell on the street. That was what every girl in my age was doing, and that's what I was doing. And during those times, my mother would say something like, if only she was educated, if only I'm educated, I wouldn't allow you to do this. So partly it's what I had over and over again from my mother. So the inspiration of wanting to do something different, to get some education, partly came from her. But that is how I accidentally crossed one stage, which is the elementary, into the high school. And I went to a women teachers college, where I learned to be a grade 3 teacher, and then a grade 2 teacher. And my older sister left this small village we grew up and married into a city, a town that has electricity. So they had a TV. And one day I was watching the TV and a woman, the first female commissioner of the state where I come from, was speaking. And she said one of her missions as the first female commissioner in the state was to help girls to go to school. And I have already finished teacher's college, grade 2, and I thought she was speaking to me. So I sought out to look for her. But we have, in our society, we have a lot of structures and statutes. So it was not easy for me to visit with the Commissioner of Education then. I must have visited her office over 30 times. 30 times I was turned away. 30 times I will go back. So I did not have no in my dictionary. If it cannot be done, I would tell myself I will do it. So I persisted to wanted to see her. And I guess one of the last time I went to the office, the security guard was really upset. And he was banging his table. And he said, "Young girl, what are you here for? You've worn me out. I will allow you to see Madame, but promise me you will not come back again." So that is how finally he allowed me to see Madame. And the first question she asked me when I entered was, "What can I do for you, young girl?" And I told her I had her on the TV. She said what she said about helping, and that is why I came to help, for her to help me. And I remember her saying something like, "You have guts." And that's the first time I had the word guts. And I used my pen to write on my palm so that I could check it out in the dictionary since I never learned English. And anyway, I finally, through her help, got into the university. And that is accidental, going into the university through the help of this woman. But it's important to stress here that during those times in the northern part of the country, we still, up to today, have no girls going into universities or colleges. So they had what they call the affirmative action. We call it, it's a quota system where they will lower the marks. And then when they lower it, they will allow us from the catchment area, which they call it catchment area, to come in. So I came into the university because of this affirmative action movement. And that is why I have a passion towards this equality and equal treatment for all. But that is how I happen to be. It is a long story. I just tried to cut it short for you. So that's how I got accidentally educated.
Your story is amazing, and your tenacity is really impressive. My question is, as a lawyer, you're operating under the constraints of Shariah, which was introduced in 1999, right?
Right.
How, as a lawyer, do you argue a case when what I see is extreme ambiguity in Sharia law is there? I mean, how do you deal with that, with something that...
When you say ambiguity, do you have specific that you want to mention?
I guess when I say ambiguity, I mean more that it's open to so many different interpretations.
So it's a very good question. It's an excellent question. In northern Nigeria, you had on the part of what the movie she showed, women for the first time in the Palestinian areas were allowed to be judges. But in Nigeria, women are not even allowed to appear before a Sharia court judge. So we don't have female judges. And when we started the case in 2000, we were not allowed to appear to speak before a Sharia court judge. So at the beginning, what I did was to write a note. You remember our former team? We write a note and we pass it to the male and he will read it, and we write another note, we pass it this way, they will read it. So at the beginning, it took 5 years for me to have a voice in the courtroom. So I need to put that on the table. But the second thing I wanted to answer as to how do we do it when the law seems on the face of it so different. Now, 3 things I want to mention here. We as lawyers do not interpret the law. We state the law as they are. Now, the Nigerian Constitution is the governing law, is the jurisprudence of the country, is the ground norm. But Section 1 of that law says any law that come into conflict with the Nigerian Constitution, to the extent of that conflict, that law shall be null and void. And we don't interpret it. It will be the Supreme Court that will interpret whether the Sharia penal code law that came into operation in 2000 is in conflict with Section 1 of the Constitution. Now, Section 10 of the same Constitution provides that there shall be no state religion. So we point to the court, there shall be no state religion. If you have Sharia, it means the rights of non-Muslims are affected. And they have declared it as a state religion, but the court will interpret it. But on the other hand, there are people that say, no. The Constitution gave us a right under Section 38 for freedom of religion. So we are going to use that section to argue our case, that we are free to practice Sharia. The also court will interpret Section 39 of the Constitution. But let me tell you where we put our weight. We lay our weight on Section 277 of the same Constitution, because up to today, the law only provides for civil matters. Sharia can only be settled on civil matters. And Section 277 of the Constitution itemizes those civil matters: marriages, children, gifts, divorce. It itemizes them very clearly. And so this is what we bring with us, and this is our strength, in terms of trying to bring the Constitution into it. But the Constitution is such a big document that you don't bring before the Sharia court to argue. And so bringing it down to the language of the court, we use the same Sharia. And that is where I think the international legal instrument plays a huge role. Now, Nigeria has signed several international legal instruments, from the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights to the right for women, CEDAW, to the right for children. We have signed protocols, treaties, subsequent protocol, we have signed them. Actually, we have domesticated some of them. But it's also too big for the Sharia courts. But recently, while I was researching to write this book, and part of what I wrote and I add in this book, was my discovery of a very interesting legislation, which maybe some of you know about. It's called the Universal Islamic Declaration of Human Rights. I'll repeat, the Universal Islamic Declaration of Human Rights. It has actually more human rights than the United Nations own. And if I can do something differently, is for us to introduce this before the Sharia court in the language they will understand. So we approach the court from their knowledge base. And maybe finally I will say this, that most of the judges cannot read or write in English. The law is in English. So we have to go from English, from Hausa, to English, to Arabic. And so there's different layers on how to handle it. But we must not have ego. It doesn't work. You must get yourself free of that to be in the Sharia court, especially before the men. They are men, and we are not men. Yes, behind you, okay.
If the Ummah is allowed to follow Sharia, wherever it is, and then Christians follow canon law, how do nation states then create any level of universal expectation of the law if personal status laws like the Sharia and canon are allowed to be the national law?
It's a very good question, and I think this is an issue that has been discussed now by scholars and non-scholars alike. When you have a country of mixed race and mixed religion, is it fair to want to have one law to govern the people? Now, let me give you an example. In Nigeria, the law is applied in 12 states, the Sharia. Now, in each of these 12 states, there are Christians. Where does the right of the non-Muslim begins when you want to apply the law? So in the southern part of Nigeria, another governor says, if the North insists on having Sharia, I will have a canon law. So my sense of it is that we'll create a chaos in the system. And we must agree on what we were talking earlier on the basics. And that is faith, and that is our ethics. What is it that we all believe? Can we come under this common ground of understanding? We believe in the fundamental human right of right to life, and all the other rights that we all believe in as religion. And I think from this we can have a discussion and a conversation as how we can live together. But having a religious law in any given setting, especially when it's a pure religious setting, a country, even Saudi Arabia today have non-Muslims. I think we are not doing Islam justice by having to apply strict interpretation of some of these laws.
Hi, my name is Adam Miles, and I run a little nonprofit here. I've actually been in Nigeria 4 times in the past 2 months. It's been a little crazy. The next year, we're going to be setting up a soccer academy and taking over young women, like my daughter here, to use soccer, actually, as a way to relate to the children in some of the villages that you speak of. So I have a million questions for you. I'll spare you the 999,000 and just hit you with one. One of the things as we approach taking these dozens of kids over, these young women over, is the concerns about security. And as I've been there, I've been mostly in the South. I've been in Oshun State and Imo State, and they talk about the northern states and all the violence that's happening there. And I'm just wondering what, if any, influence Sharia law has on the situation with Boko Haram, et cetera, in the north. And I appreciate your answer. Thanks.
Thank you. Good question. Boko Haram is like the Al-Qaeda we have of northern Nigeria, for some of you that have not followed some of these issues in Nigeria. They are a sort of a terrorist group. Sometime in 2011, the Harvard Divinity School and the woman I mentioned earlier on sitting in front of here decided that we should change the course of the discussion of issues of freedom and security, and especially focus on women. And we brought in the Sultan of Sokoto. And the Boko Haram had made it very public, maybe you also know about it, that the only person they respect is the Sultan of Sokoto to adjudicate between them and the people they disagree, especially the authorities. Now, what Boko Haram want, my own little knowledge, they want Sharia. What Sharia? Because we already have Sharia. And so they have been fighting for the past couple of years now and killing and maiming. My thought is that there are multiple problems in the country, and I'm not here to stand brief for anyone. But three major issues, if the government can address and reduce, it could help. The unemployment. We have too many youths that are doing nothing, that are pawns in the hands of people that want to use them with very little money. And I think in long term, we have to reduce that. The border is a huge issue. When we don't produce arms, we don't have arm industry in Nigeria. But the Boko Haram are so sophisticated that yesterday they use rockets to shoot down plane. Where is it coming from? It's likely going to be from the borders. We have longest borders in West Africa with Niger and with Cameroon. So I think they have to address the issue of border security. I understand they have now planes that are mounted to follow them, but it seems the Boko Haram is stronger in terms of their ammunition. So locally, these are the two things. The last thing I want to say internationally is the debate that is going on here, which I have no right to comment on, about guns. But I think globally, it's affecting some of the developing countries, such as mine, where guns go into wrong hands. We are all potential victims of extremists. And that is partly what is happening with Boko Haram. It may be a phase that we are passing, but it's not a pleasant one.
Hi, I'm a journalist, and so I'm really interested in media in your country. So does the media play a role in your cases or in issues?
The country has, I mentioned to you, 36 states. 19 of the states are geographically located in the north. The media is located in the south. Main media is in the south. So when we started the Sharia cases, we had coverage from the media of the south. The one or two medias we have in the north refuse to cover it. And they, I think mostly on religious ground, they pull back. And subsequently, when the international community picked up a lot of the stories, they felt drawn into it to comment. But there are a lot of dynamics that play themselves with the media. But I said earlier this afternoon that the media play a very important role in shaping a lot of our opinion and also shaping what happens in some of our cases. And we have to be strategic in ensuring that we get the media, especially those ones that are friendly to reporting both sides, to take active interest in not only reporting when the dog bites the man, according to them, is no story. But when the man by the dog is a story. So when we get them to have some balance that both are stories, and they give less voices to the extremists. And I personally think this is something that is disturbing, that the little elements of the extremists have been given bigger voices with the microphone and with the screen of the TV, and it empowering them. Just yesterday, I was looking at the TV, and the Boko Haram you mentioned, the leaders of the Boko Haram, if some of you remember Osama bin Laden, how he had his guns by his side, and some of his associates, exactly the posture of Osama bin Laden and his 3 guards around him was the posture of Boko Haram. That is their public picture. And so the more they see, the more they take in, the more they adapt and do. And I think we give them less publicity, we are better off for it. I'm not going to impose, and I don't want to apportion anything, but I think we could do better when we have less publicity on the extremist. Yes.
Were they all in stoning, or were they in other areas? And were you able to prevent the stonings, or how did the cases come out, or where are you now and what you're doing?
So most of the cases are women. 30% are women sentenced to die by stoning. 20% are children that have their limbs, there's a judgment to have their limbs amputated. Most of the cases we had the opportunity to handle in court, so far, there is no stoning. Unfortunately, we have 3 amputations, not of children, but of men. We hope there won't be stoning, and what we have tried to fight all this while is that there will not be the first stoning, because if you get the first stoning, then there will be no stopping of stoning. Most of the cases we argued and won in court cannot be used as precedent, but it can be used to persuade the judges of other courts. So we use them as persuasive effect on other cases we had in other courts. Yes, it has been not as easy to consider putting them in a box, say, we want to ensure that Sharia give them justice, and we try to make sure that we take cases to court where we know we could win. Those one we cannot win, we deal with it on bail. And the moment we get the bail of the victims, we hardly have trial. So a chunk of the cases, after bail, the cases disappear. I still have some few cases I go to court for, not stoning. For the past 3 to 4 years, they have not pronounced, to the best of my knowledge, any stoning case, most likely because of the international attention they have gotten. And 1 or 2 incidents happened that they think we have the media with us, and we're going to expose some few things. But there has not been stoning, but we still have few amputation cases in the prisons. And so that is our focus now. We've also tried to see if it is possible for us to address the substantive issue of the law itself. Can we reform Sharia? Can the law be reviewed? And we had a huge pushback, especially from scholars of Islam that should know better. And they said, this is the law of Allah, we can't change it. And so this pushback had slowed down the system. The most important institution that could do something about it is the Supreme Court of Nigeria. But the Supreme Court has not taken, they take cases that they want to take. They have not taken a case to interpret the Sharia within Section 1 or any other section of the Constitution. So we are having this vagueness. We don't know how it's going to end. But that is it. So for now, that is what is going on. Yes.
Do women have the right to vote in Nigeria?
Yeah, we do.
And do you think long-term that'll change things?
It's more the right to know, not the vote. When you have high illiteracy, your vote could be compromised. But when you know, when you are literate, then you could be able to decide something that is good for you. And in a lot of our villages, we still have a very high degree of illiteracy. And we have high degree of poverty. So it's very easy to buy vote with salt, with grains, with money. So vote counts, but I think short term, there are other factors that plays into those votes.